If you're looking for NHL players at the 2018 Olympics in South Korea, you are out of luck. It will literally be amateur hour at next winter's games, with the NHL announcing that the majority of clubs are quote-unquote adamantly opposed to disrupting the season. This is not sitting well with the players. The NHL Players Association fired back, saying, quote, "The players are extraordinarily disappointed and adamantly disagree with the NHL's short-sighted decision to not continue our participation in the Olympics. Any sort of inconvenience the Olympics may cause to next season's schedule is a small price to pay compared to the opportunity to showcase our game and our greatest players on this enormous international stage." Let's get the thoughts of an Olympic legend. Michael Eruzione was the captain of the men's hockey team in 1980. That was the Miracle on Ice team. Now he's the director of special outreach at Boston University. Mike, it's an honor to speak with you. What do you think of the new rule banning NHL players from the 2018 Olympics?
Well, and this might sound crazy, but I wasn't very happy with it. I saw how frustrated these guys are and how disappointed they are. And the bottom line is they take a great, deal of pride, when they have an opportunity to compete representing their country on the largest stage. So it is a little frustrating that these guys aren't going to get that opportunity that some of them have already experienced, but some have dreamed about having the opportunity to do.
Mike, considering the experience you had in 1980, what it meant to you, what it meant to the country, if Gary Bettman had come to you and asked for your advice, what would you have said?
I would have said, go play. I think it's a great opportunity to showcase the skill level of the talent of so many players all across the world, not just, Team USA or Team Canada. So many great players that are playing in the National Hockey League now, representing their country. Ovechkin has already made a comment about it. Henrik Lundqvist said it was an honor to represent Sweden in the Olympic Games and how disappointed he was. So I feel bad for the players. They're not going to get an opportunity to do something that's pretty special in your life. But I've said many times, when you put a jersey across that says USA, it's pretty special to be a part of that. And unfortunately, these guys aren't going to get to do something that they really feel strongly about.
Mike, we know what it meant to you. You were an amateur. Amateurs were made up that 1980 Olympic hockey team. So people may be a little surprised to hear you supporting the NHLers. What will it mean now to this group of amateurs, the college players, those lower tier players, now that they get a chance to compete in the Olympics?
Well, I think there's two things you got to think about. First of all, in 1980, there were maybe only one or two Americans playing in the National Hockey League. So I think we were the best players available at the time. The only other country that was an amateur country was the Canadians. All the European countries were professionals. So we played in an era that was very, very different than today. And when they allowed the pros into the Olympic Games, I was curious how they were going to play. Are they going to go after each other knowing they got an NHL season coming up? And I was blown away by how competitive and how intense the games were. So I kind of changed my tune, having watched the NHL players and showcase their skill level and see how far the game of hockey has come. The game of hockey today is so different than it was in 1980. The influx of the Europeans, they're so much better. The skill level is so much better. Our depth chart in the United States is a lot bigger than it ever was. So it really is a different thing. And we're never going to see 1980 again. It's not going to happen. Regardless of the hockey victory, it was more than a hockey game in 1980. It meant more to a country from somewhat of a political standpoint than it did as a hockey game. So it's very, very different today than it was 38 years ago.
Mike, you touched on Alex Ovechkin. Obviously, he's been very defiant. He says he's playing for Russia regardless in 2018, doesn't care about the consequences. If you put yourself in his shoes, obviously a big-time star, would you insist on playing even if it resulted in a fine or a serious suspension?
I don't think he cares. And I've never met him, but I know he's very strong in his convictions about going over. I know he said it before when they talked about maybe not going to Sochi. So, if Ovechkin says he's not going, I don't believe he'll go, whatever the consequences might be. He'll just maybe say, okay, then I'll turn pro and go back and play up in the KHL league. So it'll be interesting if players follow Ovechkin. And I'm not just saying, the Russian players, any of the Swedish players, the Finnish players, the U.S. players, the Canadian players. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens when push comes to shove down the road. But also, you talked earlier, Maggie, I think you talked about the amateurs playing. I think the United States and USA Hockey has already got something in place. And I don't think it's just going to be college players. I think they're going to get some of the professional players who are playing overseas, some of the minor league players who might have their contracts have ended, maybe an ex-NHL player who just recently retired that's still making, can play a little. So you're not going to see what we saw again in 1980 where a bunch of college players are going to be on this team. They're going to get a handful of pros who are available. And there's a lot of Americans playing overseas who would probably be on this roster if it doesn't come to fruition again that the pros don't play. But I'm still not convinced that this is over. I still think there's still a chance.
You do think there's a chance? Okay. Who do you think will give in? Will it be the NHL, or will it have to be the players who would have to make some concessions to allow the clubs to release them from their contracts to go play in the Olympics?
Well, like any negotiations, I think both people have to give in a little. I think the IOC has to give in a little. I think obviously the NHL, the Players Association, the Ice Hockey Federation. I mean, if everybody wants this to happen, and it seems like three of the groups do and one doesn't, they all have to give in a little to make this work.
Very interesting. We're going to keep our eyes on this story for sure. But Mike, just switching gears for a second, want to get your thoughts on another story going on in sports right now. The Mississippi State women's basketball team, they snapped UConn's 110-game winning streak, but they did not win the NCAA title. Now, some have compared this to your 1980 team, how you beat the Soviets, and then you went on to beat Finland in the gold medal game and won. Was it just as important to win the gold as it was to beat the Soviets in 1980?
Well, if you don't win the gold, you don't win the tournament, and that's why you go to the tournament, is to win the tournament. So if we had lost to Finland and not won a gold medal, who really cares about the Soviet victory? And there was a chance, people don't know this, that if we lost to Finland, we could have come in fourth place and not even won a medal. So as great as the Soviet victory was, the Finnish victory was greater for us as a team because we accomplished everything we had worked for and sacrificed, and it had come to fruition. But, I mean, the UConn season and what Gino's done down there is absolutely mind-boggling. But I still think it's a little different comparison to us beating the Soviets. I've always said if a group of college women basketball all-stars beat the NBA all-stars, that might be somewhat of a comparison. But what Mississippi State did was incredible. But I'm sure they're very, very disappointed that they didn't win the ultimate prize.
Yeah, listen, no one would know better than Michael Eruzione, the former captain of the men's hockey team. It is such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for your perspective, Mike.
All right. Thank you for having me. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too.
Bye now.